Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel defended his country's military preparedness exercises on Saturday as a deterrent against potential aggression from the United States. Joining us to talk about it is John Deaton, a U.S. Marine veteran and former federal prosecutor. Great to have you with us, John. How much of an impact do you think Cuba's actions will have on its relationship with the U.S. amid the current tensions?
Well, I think President Trump has made it clear, and thank you for having me, that now is the time to make a deal with the United States. And if you follow President Trump, you know that he is a deal maker. He likes making deals, and he's really intent on foreign policy. And so, there's been this narrative, is Cuba ready to fall? It's been a narrative through the decades, but they survived the fall of the Soviet Union and decades of sanctions of the United States. But they are facing two things, an internal crisis and an external. The internal is migration, millions and millions. They went from 11 million to 2 million, from 11 million to 9 million in population in the last 2 years. And Venezuela was their lifeline, and Maduro has been taken away. And so it's kind of ripe for them to make a deal.
Yes, so you point here to President Trump earlier this month urging Cuba to make that deal regarding the oil and money that it has been sending to Venezuela, and the President Trump saying otherwise it will, of course, face consequences. In terms of the consequences that the communist leader may be fearing or anticipating, what do you think is on the table? What's possible?
Well, I think he's got to be very concerned. Listen, no matter what you think about the Venezuela operation and the capture of Maduro, regardless of your political posture on that particular thing, it was an absolute legendary thing that our U.S. military did. They went into one of the most safeguarded compounds in South America, killed hundreds and hundreds of guards without one American casualty, and took the president of the company, well, albeit an illegitimate president, out in his pajamas at night and brought him back to the United States. A flawless, legendary operation that's got to put the president of Cuba and the leader there on notice that he might want to make a deal, because he could do all the military operations he wants. He's not going to be able to deal with the U.S. military if we decide to go.
Yeah, so with these kind of internal and external threats that you've outlined, what is the worst case scenario that may be possible here?
Well, the worst case scenario is that their lifeline, as far as Venezuela, that economically has been cut off. And right now you see the president trying to Cuba trying to reach out to China and Russia to see if he can reestablish a lifeline. But if the state fails, they're seeing 20 and 22 hours a day of power outage. If the infrastructure fails, then you give rise to someone who's more moderate in the military saying, you know what, maybe we should make a deal. And then you could see them overthrowing the current president.
Right. What kind of signals would you be looking for to see whether that is transpiring?
It really comes down to whether or not they can function and say, listen, if you can't keep the lights on, and they've been struggling, we're talking about in the major cities having power outages for most of the day. If the state can't function, if the people are losing power, if the infrastructure is crumbling, and you couple that with even more mass migration out of Cuba and a brain drain leaving, then you're going to see the military inside, which is entrenched for 60 years, saying, listen, for our own survival, let's cut a deal. Let's go to the table to the Trump administration and see if we can make a new age deal for our people.
And so that was a bit of a potential look ahead. What pressure, economic or political or otherwise, is the U.S. currently applying to Cuba?
Well, right now, I think it's more of an external. The United States is reaching out and trying to cut off any other countries doing business with China, doing business with Cuba, because they've lost their lifeline with Venezuela. And if they're able to do that, if they're able to completely choke out economically the government in Cuba and they don't have someone like China coming to their rescue, then in fact, that's probably the best situation the United States could do. I don't think the United States is going to invade Cuba. It's more about causing such pressure internally that people within the government itself who are more moderate, who are willing to strike a deal, will take this opportunity and do something right for the people of Cuba.
Do you think that this particular approach of the U.S. has changed much under this Trump administration?
Well, yeah, I think that the main thing is that when you look at Cuba's economic survival, we're talking about 75% are the estimates of coming from the Maduro regime and coming out of Venezuela. I mean, you know, you could take a 25% hit, but taking a 75% hit economically, that predominantly is what has done it. And Trump has signaled to them, listen, if you want to come to the table, come now, because it's only going to get worse for you. And I think that you maybe even see the United States engage in a little bit of cyber warfare to keep the infrastructure maxed and stressed out, to cause that internal pressure. Because the best news for the United States is obviously not externally causing regime change, but putting on such pressures, both economically and infrastructure wise, that they have a sort of a overthrow within their own government.
Now, the Chinese Communist Party has reportedly come out pledging its support and assistance to Cuba amid these tensions. How do you see that in the context of the CCP's current instability, weak economy, and internal unrest right now?
Yeah, I would be very surprised if President Trump doesn't get on the phone to President Xi of China and say, listen, you know, we're in the middle of our own potential trade warfare where we sort of seem to manage through it. But if you go to the aid of Cuba, then you're looking at more possible tariffs put on Chinese products and see if they can cut that lifeline. If they can cut off the lifeline of China or Russia coming to Cuba's aid, then I think we're really looking at a true different outcome in Cuba than we've had. That this 2026 could be the very different year where Cuba changes more for the positive for the people. But they're certainly looking for a lifeline. China's extending it. The question is, will President Trump be able to successfully interfere with cutting that off?
All right. Great to hear your insights today. Thank you so much. John Deaton, also running for the U.S. Senate in Massachusetts. So
I am. Thank you.